In this video, we're going to learn about sources of light. This is the first lesson in the optics unit. First, we'll start off by defining what light is. So light is a form of energy, and it's a form of energy that travels as a wave specifically. We can see a picture of a wave over here, and we'll analyze the details of waves in another lesson. But for now, just understand that this is what a wave looks like over here. And we know that light is important for a variety of reasons. The most important reasons you probably know already is you need light to see things. So when you see this tree, it's because light from the sun hits the tree, bounces off the tree or reflects off the tree and goes into your eyes and your brain perceives it. We also need light for another biological reason, and that's for oxygen. If you remember from our course that plants have plant cells which have chloroplasts which do photosynthesis, and photosynthesis makes oxygen for us. And it needs sunlight in order to do that process. So light's very important. There's many more reasons, but here are two of the most clear reasons that we, as humans and other living things, need light. In general, there's two main sources of light. There's natural sources of light and artificial sources of light. Natural sources of light are things that exist in nature, like sunlight or light from other stars, lightning. Artificial sources is light made by humans. So for example, a light bulb is an artificial source of light because it's made by humans. There's many ways you can produce light. We're going to discuss those many ways in this lesson. There's incandescence, fluorescence, bioluminescence, chemiluminescence, electric discharge, triboluminescence, and phosphorescence. We'll start with incandescence. Incandescence is a way to produce light where you take a piece of metal and you heat it up. You heat it up so much that eventually it starts to release energy in the form of light. It starts to glow. So here you have a stove element. It's being heated up. It heats up so much it starts to glow red, so it's producing red light. This is a light bulb, an incandescent light bulb. On the inside is a piece of metal. When electricity flows through it, the electricity heats up the metal here, called a tungsten filament, and it heats up so much that it starts to glow. And that's called incandescence. Now, this incandescent light bulb is very inefficient, meaning it does produce light, but it also releases a lot of energy, heat as energy, and that's very wasteful. Then we have fluorescence. Fluorescence is another method of light production, and so we'll take a look at how that works here. This is a fluorescent light bulb. You can often see these fluorescent light bulbs in the ceiling at your school. Those long tubes. And so what happens here is when you turn on the electricity, on the inside there's some mercury atoms that basically release some UV light. And that UV light is going to make this fluorescent coating here very energized. And that's going to cause the fluorescent coating to release energy in the form of light that you can see. So when you pass electricity through here, mercury atoms inside the fluorescent bulb will release UV light. You can't see UV light. It's actually invisible, so you don't see that. But the UV light is causing the fluorescent coating on the inside to become energized, and that's leading to it releasing light that you can actually see. This is more energy efficient because it does not produce as much heat. This is an example of fluorescent light bulb over here, a compact fluorescent light bulb. The same process or similar process happens within when you turn on electricity. So basically fluorescence is when you cause the fluorescent material to become very hyper and excited with energy, and it causes it to release visible light. One practical application of that was shining UV light onto paper money, and little designs would fluoresce to see if it was real or fake money. Another application is simply the fluorescent light bulbs. You can also use UV light when you're trying to look for example, pet urine in the home that you can't see but you can smell. Fluorescence will happen and you can detect it using UV light. How does this happen at the level of the electrons? So when you study fluorescence at the level of the electrons, electrons start off in a state called a ground state, where they don't have a lot of energy. When you shine the UV light onto them, the electron becomes very excited because it has lots of energy, so we call that an excited state. Now, as you know, what goes up must come down. So when the electron comes back down to the ground state, it releases energy in the form of light, and that's the light that you see. It's a quick absorption and a quick release. The moment you shut off this UV light source, the fluorescence stops. So this is an example of fluorescence. When you wash your clothes with Tide detergent, and you go out in the sun, or you shine UV light on your clothes after, it looks like you're very, very bright. And it's not necessarily because your clothes are clean. It's because it's a fluorescent material that gets excited when there's UV light, and then it releases a lot of energy in the form of light, and so you look like you're shining. The next method of light production is called bioluminescence. Bioluminescence is essentially chemical reactions in living things that release light. So this over here is an anglerfish. If you've seen the movie Finding Nemo, you might know what that is. There's a little bulb on top of its head that has chemical reactions that happen on the inside, which glow. Over here we have a flashlight fish, which has glowing specialized cells that do chemical reactions that cause the cell to glow. Here you can see a fungus, almost like a mushroom, that also has chemical reactions inside of it and allow it to glow green. And so that's called bioluminescence, light being produced by living things. This is an example of bioluminescence inside this little aquarium here, shaped like a dinosaur. There's mini creatures called dinoflagellates. And those dinoflagellates, when you shake them, a chemical reaction happens that causes them to release light. This is actually often seen in some parts of the world where there's waves in oceans. When those waves occur, it causes the dinoflagellates to smash into each other, which causes them to do their chemical reaction to release light. So you'll see flashes of blue light in the waves. You can see that in this video. A very common example of bioluminescence is a fruit fly, the firefly, sorry. Here you can see a little enzyme or a chemical reacting with oxygen, and that'll produce the chemical oxyluciferin. So we have luciferin reacting with oxygen, producing oxyluciferin, and at the same time that's going to release energy in the form of light. Another method of light production is called chemiluminescence. Chemiluminescence is essentially like bioluminescence, but it doesn't happen in a living thing. So it's a chemical reaction that produces light, but it's not in a living thing. We often call it cool light because it doesn't release energy as heat, it just releases energy as light, so it's not hot. A glow stick is a very common example of that. So this is a glow stick over here. The glow stick has two tubes, a tube that's made of plastic on the outside, a tube that's made of glass on the inside. There's two different chemicals, one in the glass, one in the plastic. They're not allowed to mix right now because nothing is broken. Once you crack the glow stick, you break the glass on the inside. That releases the chemical from the glass, allows both chemicals to react. It produces new products and releases energy in the form of light, and that's chemiluminescence. And so you can see examples of that here. This here is a type of light production called electric discharge. You've seen these are called neon lights. You often see them in stores as the open or closed signs. And basically inside these lights you have gases. Usually you have noble gases. It doesn't just have to be noble gases, but one of the most common ones is neon. When you pass electricity through that noble gas or through that gas, it causes the gas electrons to become excited, and then when they drop back down, they release energy. So that's called electric discharge, putting electricity through gas, which causes it to glow or release light of a different color. And you can identify which gas you have oftentimes by passing electricity through it and seeing what color light is actually produced. Next we have triboluminescence. You might remember this term from grade 9 science and electricity. Triboluminescence, tribo refers to friction. So you can create light by rubbing things together, and that's called triboluminescence, creating light by friction. Here we have a rattle used by indigenous tribes. On the inside there is a quartz crystal. There's a bunch of quartz crystals. When the rattle is shaken, the quartz crystals rub together, so that's friction, and it creates light, and it could be used as a signal. This is a really cool demo you can do in the dark if you crush wintergreen mints really quickly in a very, very dark room with pliers or your teeth, but you got to be looking into a mirror. It'll actually create a spark of light. And so that's called triboluminescence, rubbing, or using friction to create light. Then we have phosphorescence. Phosphorescence is basically like fluorescence. You energize a phosphorescent material. The electrons get excited and they come back down, but it's more of a slow process. So it's a slow release of energy instead of a fast release. So that's commonly glow-in-the-dark items. You charge them up with some light, and then you turn off the light, and then these glow for some period of time until they lose all their energy. So it's like fluorescence, but just over a longer period of time. And that's glow-in-the-dark materials. Similar process shown here with the electrons jumping up and then coming back down, but more slowly for phosphorescence. And this is a demo of phosphorescence. You'll see that during one of our labs, but essentially it's beads that you can charge up with UV light. They change color because they have phosphorescent material on them, and then they slowly release the energy they absorbed in the form of this color until eventually it disappears and goes back to being white. To finish off, we'll take a look at the difference between luminous and non-luminous objects. Luminous objects are objects that can produce their own light. So for example, a light bulb, a star, or like the sun, for example, fireflies, they can make their own light. But non-luminous objects, also called illuminated, they can't make their own light. They don't produce their own light. So for example, humans and other animals that don't make their own light. The moon, even though we say there's moonlight, it's not really light from the moon. It's actually light from the sun hitting the moon, bouncing off the moon, and then going into our eyes, and that's what we see. But it's not really moonlight. It's sunlight. A textbook, for example, that doesn't make its own light. So anything that makes its own light is called luminous. Anything that does not make its own light is called non-luminous. You can complete learning goals and worksheets provided as practice. Make sure you review important definitions and understand examples of each type of the light production. Be able to define what light is. As you think about how you're going to summarize the unit in your lab notebook according to your teacher direction, these are some guidelines that you can use for this particular lesson.